right, good morning, and welcome to By Faith Christian Church, where we walk by faith and not by sight. As always, I'm so happy and blessed to be here to share God's word with you all. And we are in Genesis, the 38th chapter. Last week, we took a break from Genesis because I wanted to offer words of encouragement. And so last week was just about God being on the throne and how we belong to God, and God is our provider, and there's no need for us to fear. So now we're back in the book of Genesis, and this chapter 38 and 37, we talked about Joseph and his brothers and all of that. And 38 is about one of his brothers, Judah, and then we'll get back to Joseph. So I'm not sure why the Bible stuck this story right here as we were moving along about Joseph, and we were talking about how nobody can stop your blessing. They think they can, but they can't. But right here in Genesis 38, it's about his brother Judah and some of the ways he went about his business. So we just have a few points today, but I wanted to include this one in our sermons because I just think it's interesting when we watch all kinds of stuff on TV and on the internet and all of that. I think the Bible has more interesting stories than what we see on TV, but we can learn something from the Bible. So we just have a few points today. And so again, where we find ourselves is Judah, Joseph's brother, has left home. And we know how it is sometimes when people leave home, they leave home for a reason so they can do their own thing. And so that's pretty much, he left home and he went to Canaan and he married a Canaanite woman, or he went to um, Adullam is what it's called. And so we'll get into that story and we'll hit our points and then we'll be done for today. So Genesis 38 chapter, starting with the first verse. About that time, Judah left home and moved to Adullam, where he stayed with a man named Hira. There he saw a Canaanite woman, the daughter of Shishah, and married her. And he married her. When he slept with her, she became pregnant and gave birth to a son, and he named the boy Er. Then she became pregnant again and gave birth to another son, and she named him Onan. And when she gave birth to a third son, she named him Shelah. At the time of Shelah's birth, they were living in Kazib. So with this, he leaves home, he marries a Canaanite woman, and we know from our stories that was really not the best thing to do because they were different. They had different religious practices, and it was best for him to stay with his own kind, but he didn't do that. So he's got this woman. They have these three sons, and that's where we are in this story. So let's keep moving. Sixth verse. In the course of time, Judah arranged for his first son, Er, to marry a young woman named Tamar. But Er was a wicked man in the Lord's sight, so the Lord took his life. Then Judah said to Er's brother Onan, go and marry Tamar, as our law requires of the brother of a man who has died. You must produce an heir for your brother. And so what we have going on here, his firstborn son, Judah's firstborn son, he gets a wife for him because that was customary. Back then, you know, your father or your family would pick the wife for you. But it says that he was so wicked. The Bible does not say what he did that was so wicked, but it says that he was wicked in the Lord's sight. So God took his life. So God exercised judgment on him, whatever it was. And so with that, I think it's really important that as we're in this world and doing whatever it is we think we're grown enough to do, that God is still on the throne. And the same way God exercised his judgment in Er's life, he can do the same for us when we are wicked and not doing the things that we should be doing. So he took his life. So then Judah, the custom was back then, well, if the brother dies, then the next brother will have to marry the wife and have a child with that wife so that she could have an heir, because widows, you know, if you were a widow, the chances of you getting married again was slim to none. and women didn't work, so they needed some security. So he tells his second son, Onan, to take Tamar as the wife based on their custom so that he could have a baby with her and she could have an heir. The problem was that the heir would belong to his brother, his oldest brother, who died, and not to him. So let's see how he takes this. So the ninth verse, but Onan was not willing to have a child who would not be his own heir. So whenever he had intercourse with his brother's wife, he spilled the semen on the ground. This prevented her from having a child who would belong to his brother. But the Lord considered it evil for Onan to deny a child to his dead brother. So the Lord took Onan's life too. So now two brothers, Tamar married to two guys, they both died. God was like, the first one was so wicked. The second one, Onan, you're supposed to help her conceive a child so that she will have some security and that child could get the inheritance. Instead of you doing that, he was taking advantage of her. He didn't want to have a child with her, so he was having sex with her, but he wasn't going to impregnate her. So it says that he would spill his semen on the ground, and God was like, nope, that's not good. You're taking pleasure in being with Tamar. You're taking advantage of Tamar. So I'm tired of this. And he took his life. And so we really need to be careful about taking advantage of people. And think about the position that Tamar was in. Her first husband had already passed. Women didn't have rights and all of those things like they do now, and the ability to work and support themselves. So what could she do? She just had to be with him. But he never had any intentions of impregnating her so that she could have an heir who would take care of her. But he was still having sex with her, and so he was taking advantage of her, and God said no, no. And as I was studying this, I was like, "Ooh, people, they really need to be careful about taking advantage of people." And so that's the point I want to leave right there, that this taking advantage of her led to God taking his life on today. So we really need to be careful about what we do to people, how we do things to people on today. So the 11th verse says, then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, go back to your parents' home and remain a widow until my son Selah is old enough to marry you. So what was happening here? Judah sends her home. Two sons are dead. They do have a third son, but he's young. And so he's saying, go home, go back to your father's house. And when Selah is old enough to marry, then you'll get to marry him. And then you can have a son and you can have security and all of that. But Judah didn't really intend to do this because he was afraid Selah would also die like his two brothers. So it made me think as I was studying this that Judah was blaming Tamar. You was with my first son and he died. Now you're with my next son and he died. You really think I'm going to give you my third son? Do you really think I'm going to do that? But that's what he said to her. Going back home, Sheila grow up, and then you'll have a husband. But he really didn't intend to do that at all. So Tamar went back to live in her father's home. So you see the deception there, right? Verse 12. So years later, Judah's wife died. After the time of mourning was over, Judah and his friend Hira, the Adulamite, went up to Timnah to supervise the shearing of his sheep. Someone told Tamar, look, your father-in-law is coming up to Timnah to shear his sheep. So I don't know how long she was back at home with her father. I don't know how much time passed between that point and then Judah's wife died and all this, but she's at home and she's wearing these widow clothes and mourning clothes and no prospects and all of that, just waiting for him to keep his word, right? But she knew that Shelah had already grown up, but still Judah did not keep his word. So now Judah's without a wife. He's going to shear sheep. Tamar hears about it. And so we're going to keep going. 14th verse. So Tamar was aware that Shelah had grown up, but no arrangements had been made for her to come and marry him. So she changed out of her, excuse me. So she changed out of her widow's clothes and covered herself with a veil to disguise herself. Then she sat beside the road at the entrance of the village to Enam, which is on the road to Timnah. Judah noticed her and thought she was a prostitute, since she had covered her face. So he stopped and propositioned her. Let me have sex with you, he said, not realizing that she was his own daughter-in-law. And so here is Tamar. She heard that he was coming that way. And so she came up with this plan. Yep, she said, okay, at this point, Shayla, he's grown and he has not sent for us to be married. Excuse me. So he has not done that. So I need to come up with my own plan. So she takes off her widow clothes, disguises herself as a prostitute. She puts on a veil so Judah cannot recognize her. He does not know that that's his daughter-in-law, and she sits by the road. And so back then they had what were called, they called them shrine prostitutes, and they used sex as a part of their religious ritual that was tied to fertility with their plants and agriculture and all of that. So she sat by the road. He came by. Sure enough, he propositioned her. All right. So she had a plan too, right? He didn't know. So let's keep going. So he deceived her. Now she's deceiving him. All right. So he says, let me have sex with you. He said, not realizing that she was his own daughter-in-law. How much will you pay to have sex with me? Tamar asked. 17th verse. I'll send you a young goat from my flock, Judah promised. But what will you give me to guarantee that you will send the goat? She asked. What kind of guarantee do you want? He replied. She answered, leave me your identification seal and its cord and the walking stick you are carrying. So Judah gave them to her. So as I was thinking about this, I was thinking that Judah, he probably didn't anticipate running into, and this is just me talking, a prostitute along the way, because he didn't even have anything with him of value to pay for those services. However, he ran into her and he took advantage of the situation. And so sometimes we have to be careful about our impulses. And we might not intend to do one thing, but we get involved in it. And so with that, we just have to be careful, because sometimes we're so spontaneous, and things look great and it sounds great and all of that. And then we find ourselves in a situation that we didn't anticipate, we didn't plan for, we didn't even see it coming. So just keep your eyes open, keep your ears open. And one thing that about me is I'm not spontaneous, and people complain about that, like, you're just not spontaneous. I'm like, I'm not, because I like to plan and always have stuff to do. And you can really never call me and be like, hey, let's go to the movies, or hey, let's go to the mall, because I always have stuff to do. And if I try to be spontaneous, then something else that I should have been working on falls behind. So I don't get to be spontaneous. But some people are impulsive. Some people are spontaneous, and there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes I notice with spontaneous people that they don't always get things done, or they're the kind of people, you ever met somebody that's always on their way when they're supposed to be somewhere? And they're always late, because all it takes is for something to happen for them to go right when they should be on the way somewhere else, or for them to go left, and they always on the way and they haven't left the house yet, or sometimes they don't even show up. And so sometimes that's because people are spontaneous. And again, it's not a bad thing. It's just the way it is, that something gets in their way. And instead of them being able to focus and continue on with what they were doing, they get caught up in whatever it is that they get caught up in. So this is what happened to Judah. He's out there. He's on his way to shear his sheep and do what he should be doing. And then here's this prostitute. It said his wife had died. Who knows how long that was? I guess he had needs. And so he did what it is that he needed to do, what he felt he needed to do. All right. So the 18th verse. So he didn't have anything. He didn't have anything. He didn't have a goat to pay her with. He didn't have money with him, nothing. So in the 18th verse, again, it says, what kind of guarantee do you want? He replied. She answered, leave me your identification seal and its cord and the walking stick you are carrying. So Judah gave them to her. And so what is this identification seal? It was some kind of seal, some kind of cylinder like stamp that they carried with them, either around their neck or on their wrist. And the cord was like the case that they carried it in. So this would be like your driver's license today or your ID. So it was important. That seal was very important. And so she said, well, give me that and give me your walking stick. And we know that was specific to him and all of that. So she was pretty smart too. She was like, if you're not going to leave anything, pay me now, then you need to leave something of significance. So it was kind of like an insurance policy, if you will. So he gave it to her. And the thing for me about him giving it to her was that he must have been a man of integrity, because you wouldn't give your ID or something important to somebody unless you plan to send what it is you owe them so you could get your stuff back. And so I really believe that, with that transaction, he was a person of integrity. So let's keep going. Then he had intercourse with her and she became pregnant. Go figure, that one encounter. 19th verse. Afterward, she went back home, took off her veil, and put on her widow's clothing as usual. But later, Judah asked his friend Hira, the Adulamite, to take the young goat to the woman and to pick up the things he had given her as his guarantee. But Hira couldn't find her. So he asked the men who lived there, where can I find the shrine prostitute who was sitting beside the road at the entrance to Enam? Okay, so he goes back. He sends her. He sends his servant. He's like, okay, you go and take her to go and get my stuff. I need my stuff back. I need my ID back. I need my seal and my cord and my walking stick. I need my stuff back. But he goes there and asks, and nobody knows what he's talking about. They're like, yeah, we have shrine prostitutes, but not where you picked up a prostitute. So he couldn't find her. So he goes back home. All right. Whenever, and they said too, in the 21st verse, I'll finish that. He says, we've never had a shrine prostitute here, they replied. So Hira returned to Judah and told him, I couldn't find her anywhere, and the men of the village claim they've never had a shrine prostitute there. Then let her keep the things I gave her, Judah said. I sent the young goat as we agreed, but you couldn't find her. We'd be the laughing stock of the village if we went back to look for her again. So Judah was like, okay, we can't find her. I kept my end of the bargain. I sent the goat. Let's just let it go. Let's not go back down there, because we'll be the laughing stock of the village if we go looking for her again. All right, 24th verse. About 3 months later, Judah was told, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has acted like a prostitute, and now because of this, she's pregnant. Bring her out and let her be burned, Judah demanded. So now he hears that Tamar is pregnant, and with the customs, he could have her burned, which is really interesting, because why is he going against her when he didn't keep his end of the bargain, which was to send his son? He didn't do that. All right. 25th verse. But as they were taking her out to kill her, she sent this message to her father-in-law. The man who owns these things made me pregnant. Look closely. Whose seal and cord and walking stick are these? And so she pulls it out, her insurance policy, and she says, look, I know you'll recognize this stuff. It belongs to you. I'm pregnant by you. I haven't been out here doing whatever you think I've been doing. I am pregnant by you. All right, let's keep going. 26th verse. So Judah recognized them immediately and said, she is more righteous than I am, because I didn't arrange for her to marry my son Shelah. And Judah never slept with Tamar again. And so what he realized at that point is that he had done wrong. What he did was wrong to her by not sending his son. Now, what she did was wrong too, by disguising herself as a prostitute. But what he was saying was she waited. She waited. She waited a long time. I don't know how long she waited. And she tried to be true to this process, but I did something wrong. And so with that, he was able to change courses and correct what he did. And he was remorseful and he was sorry for what he had done. And as I was reading this, it got me to thinking about how many times when we make a mistake and we realize we made a mistake, once we get more information, that we change courses and we correct what it is that we were going to do. Now, he could have went on ahead and killed her and nobody would have ever known the difference, but he didn't do that. And so we have to learn how to do that, how to slow down when we make a decision, when we have new information and more information, and change what it is that we're doing. And I was thinking about this because I'm faced with so many situations where I have to take action. But what I do is I know to slow down, because you know how people come to you and they tell you one side of the story, and when you get it from them, it sounds like, yep, I know what I need to do. But when you take the time to hear the other side of the story, it's not what the first person said it was. And so with that, I have learned to do that, to listen to all the information, get as much information as I can before I make a decision. And so there have been many times where, here, just like Judah, I've had to back off. I've had to repent. I've had to say, oh, I was going to do, excuse me, I was going to do this, but now I have to do that. So God is wanting us to do the right thing. When we have new information, and it just is so disheartening that we listen to so much that goes on, and we don't take the time to find out the facts or find out what's really going on before we make a decision. And then sometimes we have the facts and we can be so prideful that we don't change what it is. And so I love that Judah recognized what he did wrong, and so he changed his course of actions. Because how many know we're not always right? We're just not always right. Sometimes people make us think that we're right, but we're not always right. All right, so he decided not to kill her. Let's go to the 27th verse. I think that's where I stopped. Yeah. So it says he never slept with her again. So that's the end of the 26th verse. When the time came for Tamar to give birth, it was discovered that she was carrying twins. Right. While she was in labor, one of the babies reached out his hand. The midwife grabbed it and tied a scarlet string around the child's wrist, announcing, "This one came out first." But then he pulled back his hand, and out came his brother. "What?" the midwife exclaimed. "How did you break out first?" So he was named Perez. Then the baby with the scarlet string on his wrist was born, and he was named Zerah. Okay, so that is the end of Genesis 38. So she was pregnant with twins. And the other reason why this story is really important is because when we think about how all this transpired, Judah not keeping his word, Tamar dressing up as a prostitute, getting pregnant, having twins, all of this is still connected to the promise to Abraham and Jesus' bloodline. It's all connected. So Perez was actually the twin that was part of Jesus's bloodline. And so when we think about this, when we think about God's promises, one of the things that really stands out to me is that we try to spend time thinking we know how God is going to do things. And when we look at this story, this was just crazy. Her dressing up as a prostitute and getting pregnant by her father-in-law, this whole thing. And then one of the twins that she has ends up being a part of the promise, Jesus's bloodline. So it's God's business, right? We don't always know, while we're talking about stuff and talking about people, we don't always know what God is doing. So let's move to our points. The first one is that God's justice and his punishment for wickedness. And so that is what happened with her two husbands, those two brothers. They were so wicked that God killed them. And so think about that when we're out there and we're doing things, that God could cut our life short. He could cut our time short because we're so wicked. The next one is do not take advantage of people. So 09, that is what he was doing. He was taking advantage of Tamar by just having sex with her, no intentions of impregnating her, because he didn't want the heir. The heir would belong to his brother and get the inheritance. And so he didn't want to do that. So he was just taking advantage of her. And so God killed him. The next one is be careful of spontaneity. And so with that, again, sometimes things will come before us. The same way Tamar just happened to be there as Judah was coming by. And again, I think based on how he didn't have anything to pay a price, he didn't have anything really with him or anything of value. I think he was really going to shear his sheep, and she just happened to be there, and so be it. So be careful of spontaneity, because those things are put in our path to get us off course, and we're not where we're supposed to be. So be careful of that. And then the last point is this. The next point is redemption and recognition of wrongdoing. And I think I hit that a lot with Judah, because he recognized his wrongdoing. He recognized that he was probably the cause of Tamar doing what she did, because he didn't keep his end of the bargain. And so then he corrected what he was going to do, a course correction. And so just think about that. When you make a decision and you get new information and you find out you've been wrong, that you were wrong in the situation, you can correct it. It's not too late to correct it on today. It's not too late to make a correction. Recognize your wrongdoing and then make that correction. And then the last point is the same as always, and that is that God is faithful. And so with God being faithful, in this story, he kept his promise to Abraham about making his lineage great, which we know is Perez, which is part of Jesus's bloodline. So may God bless and keep you all, and I look forward to seeing you all next time. Let's give the Lord a hand clap on today. All right.